So that brings us to the final section of chapter 2, which is hormone research and its impacts on uh, the gendering of males and females in our society. Um, Research on sex hormones has mostly focused on fetal development, essentially when the primary sex characteristics are being determined, and then puberty, when secondary sex characteristics begin to take shape. There's an interesting example in the textbook that talks about um, a group of children in the Dominican Republic that were born with intersex characteristics. And um, early on, it was determined by the community to treat these children as girls, and they socialized them as girls. They were accepted as girls. They were raised as girls, um, and then around the time of puberty, the biological sexual characteristics of these children began to take a more male orientation. Higher testosterone levels, larger physiques, deep voice, facial hair, things like that. And so at puberty, it became apparent that these children were going to turn into what you would see biologically as males. And the kids were encouraged by the community to shift their gender identity from female to male. And at least in the beginning, it was through ridicule and cruel behavior. But once the children chose to identify with males, the community itself began to socialize them as males. They accepted them. They made their transitions easier, and so even looking at it, even looking at hormonal research from early fetal development to that secondary puberty development can be problematic. There are, of course, problems with this research. One of them I just laid out, but there's some other ones as well. There's essentially no focus on confounding variables in the research on infants and young children. So once again, this idea of ruling out potential alternative interpretations of data to fit what the scientist is essentially trying to prove. Another is inabilities to measure causes versus effect of the hormonal surges. So which is causing which? This is a problem that we have in many of our research projects, determining what the causal variable is and what the independent variable is. Lacking credit given to the gendered organization of everyday life and impact of social interactions. So essentially failing to pay attention to the importance of socialization, social construction of reality, the social construction of gender. The example that I gave in the first slide really it really talks about the intersection of biology and social construction. Both played their part, and to say it was one or the other would be a bit disingenuous. And This also, the hormonal research also tends to lack intersectional focus. What about lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transsexuals, and queers, and intersex men and women? How do they fit into this hormonal research? Last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about bioessentialism, or the biological arguments for sex differences, which have historically tended to be politically conservative, suggesting that the social arrangements between women and men, including the social, economic, and political discrimination based on sex and gender, are actually the inevitable outcome of nature working in its mysterious ways. This is Darwinism transforming itself into social Darwinism and making an argument about gender as if it's biologically determined and biologically essential. Now, ironically, conservatives have used this as an argument for keeping the gender arrangements that exist in our society intact and in order based on the morals and values of a previous set of generations. But we are now starting to see gay men making this argument as well. And it's kind of creating some waves in the conservative groups who have traditionally argued biological essentialism, but when gay men do it, and they're essentially making the same argument, this is their gayness is an essential part of their nature, and they're just being nature, or what nature, they're just doing what nature ordained them to do, and therefore their rights should be protected, and they should be allowed to continue to operate in harmony with what nature delivered them. Of course, there are problems with biological essentialism as well. The research is far from conclusive. We must recognize how buying into biological explanations advances the cause of gender inequality. We'll talk more about this as we move forward in gender and we look into feminism, the idea that science itself and society itself is gendered, and it's gendered in favor of males and at the expense of females. And of course, we must avoid those anthropomorphic hyperboles. So yeah, that's gender. That's chapter 2 in gender. We'll keep moving forward with these lectures. Hopefully enjoying it. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email, and I will talk to you soon.